Today's guest is Kent Brown from O'Neill Manufacturing. For those that may think the name is familiar, there might be a reason. O'Neill Manufacturing Services is a regular part of our Fab 40.
They've done some tremendous work since 2018, but also you kind of focus on pushing the accountability and ownership closer to the front lines, and how that's kind of always been the O'Neill ways.
80% or more of our leaders, our top operational leaders, came from the shop floor or an entry-level salary position. So that's who I lean on. Going from 7 to 10 locations and adding one, every couple of years here, that's plenty challenging.
Yeah.
To incorporate that into your organization without disrupting what you've already got going, and we've been able to do that very well at that speed.
Mark your calendars. The 32nd Annual Advanced Laser Applications Workshop will take place from June 17th to 19th at the Suburban Collection Showcase in Novi, Michigan. This event connects manufacturers and suppliers in automotive, aerospace, agriculture, and fabrication. Enjoy 3 days of presentations from leading experts, cutting-edge demonstrations, and fascinating open houses. Discover the latest advancements and applications that are shaping the future of the industry. Visit fmamfg.org to learn more.
Hello, I'm Dan Davis from the Fabricator magazine. Welcome to the Fabricator Podcast. My colleague Tim Heston is joining us today. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Dan.
We're at the FMA annual meeting in Chandler, Arizona. Today's guest is Kent Brown from O'Neill Manufacturing Services, headquarters out of Alabama, but they have 10 locations in North America, and actually kind of fun conversation. Kent's a real kind of a down-to-earth leader of a large metal fabricating company, so I think you'll enjoy the chat.
Yeah, it was great to talk about. I mean, they've done some tremendous work since 2018, upgrading a lot of equipment, expanding their geographic footprint, opening several new plants, including one in northwest Alabama, near obviously the famous frog leveling festival, which I think is
now
special.
famous.
Now famous.
So at least a
it's
certain
it
years.
was good to hear. But also you kind of focus on how pushing the accountability and ownership closer to the front lines, and how that's kind of always been the O'Neill way, so to speak. So
So I think it'll provide an interesting perspective for one of the larger companies in the metal fabricating space. For those that may think the name is familiar, there might be a reason. O'Neill Manufacturing Services is a regular part of our Fab 40, our list of some of the largest manufacturing companies per annual sales dollar volume. And we debut that in the June issue each year in the Fabricator. And we're starting to get some submissions in for that list right now. We're taping this at the end of February. And I don't know, Tim, what do you expect to see on this year's list, kind of based on how 2024 ended and maybe some of the conversations you've had with metal fabricators about 2025?
Yeah, I mean, the submissions are already rolling in, and the kind of the focus, I think, this year, looking at all, it's kind of the theme for this year at this conference, and also probably across the Fab 40 is kind of having that value add per payroll dollar, trying to make each employee as valuable as possible. And that's kind of how, the secret behind, scalability and automation, and trying to, hey, are we shipping more products, more quality products out the door in a faster way, in a more responsive way? Because obviously orders can change. So the more we can delay the order until it actually needs to ship, so that part flow velocity through the floor is paramount. And to get that, you need that kind of, shop floor leadership, both formal and informal, and O'Neill follows that, as well as other fab shops on that Fab 40 list. I kind of get that kind of common theme of just trying to lift folks up with culture and technology, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how different the metal fabricating business is now compared to maybe 2 decades, and you've been covering it 25 plus, right?
Yeah, it's more of a especially now because we're seeing this kind of resurgence. There's this kind of um, uh, bonding that's happening among a lot of these fab shop teams. Where it's like, listen, all right, the supply chains are changing, the world may be changing. We'll see. We don't know, but obviously the waters are tumultuous. We need to make sure we're as agile as possible. And another thing too about making people as valuable as possible is that this year at this conference I've talked to some folks who either have one shop told me that oh gosh that they're having to pass on costs to customers, but they can't pass off the increased cost of certain aluminum products they're doing, so they're in the middle of negotiation. Another fab shop I talked to hedged and bought a lot of material in December, and he's in a very good spot. But that's a short-term thing. It's like you can hedge, you can make good bets on material, but that's kind of a controllable, uncontrollable, so to speak.
Right.
But it's only a short-term win. If
Yeah.
you can't base an entire sustainable business over the decades on that. It's
Yeah.
your people, and the better your people get, the calmer your ship can ride through choppy waters.
Yep. And by the time we get this episode airing, it'll probably be in mid-May. So hopefully 2025 has achieved that frog
It may-
leveling.
Frog leveling. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, and you'll have to listen to understand more because I don't know if I could explain it. So anyway, enjoy this episode of the Fabricator Podcast. Thank you. And good night.
Master the principles of precision sheet metal bending at FMA's Press Brake Certificate course. In this 2-day course, you'll learn the fundamentals and the secrets to effectively working with press brakes while earning an industry-recognized certificate. The next session starts on July 30th. Register at fmamfg.org. And now, back to the episode.
Welcome back to the Fabricator Podcast. Today's guest, Kent Brown of O'Neill Manufacturing Services. Readers might be familiar with them from the Fab 40, as well as the O'Neill names, kind of well known within the metals industry.
Just for 104 years.
Yeah, so you've been around that long. Perhaps you might have noticed. Thanks for joining us today, Tim.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we're recording this at the FMA annual meeting, and obviously top of mind is tariffs. We were jokingly say we'll probably sidestep this because this will probably air closer to the summer, so a lot of time has passed. So with that in mind, I guess the question is, how is your 2025? How do you think that'll play out, given kind of the uncertainty that's occurring in the early part of the year?
Well, we have 9 facilities. We're about to have our 9th facility in the U.S. and 1 in Mexico. And our facility in Mexico is our largest facility. So obviously it's going to be, we're going to be impacted by the tariffs. However they play out, we're not certain now how they'll affect us. But about 30% of what we make in Mexico ships back into the U.S. The other 70% ships to an OEM in Mexico, so that won't be affected. So if it does affect us, it'll only be affecting us on 30% of those sales out of Mexico. But again, we're uncertain what's going to be tariffed and what isn't, and how long it will last.
Yeah. What was, 2024, we had discussed a little bit before we started recording. It was a little bit slow in terms of activity. 2025, do you have an overall feeling about how it may work out?
Well, if I can go back a little, 2022, we had a record year. We followed that up in 2023 with another record year. So we thought that's what we do now.
Yeah.
We have record years. Well, 2024 really dropped off for us, mainly in agriculture. Was very slow in 24, but also the material handling. Everything was down about 15 to 30%, depending on the customer in 24. So we were kind of down on that. Then we looked at the numbers, and 2024 was our 3rd best year ever. So, if you win a bronze in the Olympics after winning a silver and gold, you still get a parade.
Right.
So, we shouldn't have felt so bad about 3rd best year ever. We are seeing some pickup in 2025. So we're looking at maybe another silver medal year in 25. We've been able to make some inroads into a lot of power infrastructure work, power grid related projects, also data centers and the buildings that are associated, the metal buildings for the backup generators and servers, a little bit of defense work for the first time. We really had not been in that arena before. and we're seeing our traditional 20-year OEM customers in construction, not ag yet, but in construction and material handling, starting to get back a little to where they were maybe in 21 or I'm sorry, 19 or 18.
Oh,
So
wow.
everything seems to be picking up a little for 2025 versus 2024.
That's a lot of good news.
Yes. So kind of divvy up the product mix as far as customer mix. You have, what represents your top 3 or 4 sectors that you serve? Just for people.
Construction is the largest for us, followed by material handling, forklifts, and then also telehandlers, man lifts, those sorts of products. And then maybe, we've been into agriculture, but that's been down lately. And rail has been down for quite a while, but that's even starting to come back a little, some of our rail customers. But that's our biggest customers that we service.
And we were talking a bit about kind of your recent technology investments. Kind of bring me through, what has been the biggest movers and shakers on the shop floor as far as new equipment and new directions of how you're going to flow product through the floor.
So if I can go back again, when I took over in 2018 as president of the company, we had a lot of outdated, older equipment. So we knew we had to get with the times to be competitive. We spent a lot of money in fiber lasers, 2018, 2019, and just getting our facilities to a point where they could compete with all these other companies that had moved from CO2 to fiber. After those investments, we started replacing a lot of older press brakes at our facilities. But recently, in the last 2 years, we've added our first 2 robotic press brakes. So these are for high volume parts for OEMs. In one case, the part's over 300 pounds. So we didn't want to be handling,
Wow.
200 of those a day with our employees. So we put in a robotic cell for those last year at our Greensboro facility. In 2022 or 3, I'm not sure which, we added another robotic press brake at our Cedar Falls facility for smaller parts, but high volume parts. So those were our first 2 into the robotic press brake area.
Wow, and kind of bring me through back up to the fiber lasers. I know you do heavy gauge material. Have you invested in higher power? What was your strategy there?
Yeah, initially we were mainly 6K, and now we've got 12K and 120K. Not 120K.
Wow,
120K.
wow.
Oh, yeah.
But we still have plasma and oxy, and actually that's some of this year and next year will be some plasma table replacement. But we are looking, do we go plasma or do we go higher
Right.
power laser? We haven't made that decision yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you can skip the downstream finishing.
Yeah.
And so especially for those, water jet replacement, something to that effect. You were say something?
No, is it a matter? I mean, what will go into that decision making?
The specific parts we're running, the detail of the finished part, what are we looking for in that final part, the thickness range, the speed, a lot of considerations, which is often dependent on that customer and what they want
Right.
from us. So.
Yeah. It's so funny to talk about high powered laser when, you've been around long enough and when that technology came around, it's like, oh, it's just for thin stuff. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And, and 120K doesn't actually sound too far off. It's like
Yeah, that's
actually
true. Yeah. That was a prediction.
That's a prediction. Let's see by the time this airs. No, but kind of bring us through your background before 2018. Where are you coming from as far as
Well, for 18 years, I worked in the iron foundry industry. So I managed ductile iron foundries all over the U.S. in 3 states. And there was a connection between the O'Neill family and the management of that company. So I left that company and came to O'Neill. So I've had 8 years to try and learn this industry, and I don't know it yet, but I'm trying. Of course, in the foundry, we had machining centers, we had CNCs, we had powder coating of castings, machining of castings, but we didn't have lasers, we didn't have beam lines, we didn't have welding. We didn't have press brakes, so I've had to try and learn that. But fortunately, the way our companies run, we have a general manager or assistant general manager at every location that we give the autonomy to be an entrepreneur and run their facility. So, that's helped a lot in coming from a different industry and trying to learn this industry. I have a lot of people, and 80% or more of our leaders, our top operational leaders, came from the shop floor or an entry-level salary position. So that's who I lean on, is those people to run the facilities.
And a different kind of mix of facilities and people that work in the facilities because you have a wide footprint here in the U.S. Can you kind of explain that, describe that for the audience?
Well, when I took over this position in 2018, we had 7 locations. We'll be adding our 10th in April in Tennessee. Those acquisitions have been kind of different for us. None of them, they haven't all, well, they've had some things in common, but not much. The first one, a sister company, a sister division of ours under O'Neill Industries, purchased a company that had 2 locations, and they realized one of those locations was a better fit for us, so we assumed management of that facility. So that brought in a whole new group of people, an outside company that was an existing company but had problems with its quality delivery and its customer base. So we had to focus using our sales ability and our marketing to fill that facility back up. So we've been able to get on our way correcting that facility. The next acquisition was a company that had been bankrupt for 2 weeks, and we heard about it, came in and bought the building and the assets, and now it's one of our top 3 facilities.
Wow.
So being able to come into a small town like that with about 2,000 people and 70 jobs were gone for 2 weeks, and we come back in and now the jobs are back, and it's
That's awesome.
successful and means a lot to a small community in Alabama like that. Our 10th location, which is opening up in April, our second largest customer came to us and said, we need you to be an hour away from the facility. We're going to start making these vehicles in, or this equipment in, so you need to move to Tennessee. So we said, yes, we will. So we went and bought
Yes,
a
sir.
facility in Tennessee, and we'll be making parts similar to parts we already make in Pittsburgh. So it's not a high risk for us. We know the quality. We know the customer. We know the cost to make those components, which is probably the most important thing. So we're confident about that facility and that it'll be a success for us.
Yeah.
So bring us through that bankruptcy story. That's interesting. You move in, and what were the signs that okay, what were the issues that led to that, and then give us the turnaround story. That's interesting.
We don't have time for all the issues. but the main problem was the ownership, the leadership, and bad decisions in running the company, holding people accountable, and also not understanding the cost of what you're doing and not pricing the product correctly to make sure that you're not selling below cost. So I think that was probably the biggest problem. But it was also, when it's a one-off company like that with one person trying to run it and lead it, they don't have our accounting, IT, HR, safety, quality oversight, and all the resources we can bring and the capital we can bring to a place like that. We invested over $1 million in the roof and cleaning it up and
Oh, wow.
repairing the facility. So they couldn't do that. They didn't have the capital. So just, we had the ability to make the changes quickly and right the ship. And
Did they add any type of capabilities?
we added a laser. There were no crane systems, so we added crane systems in the facility. But mainly the facility itself more than equipment,
Right.
because it's primarily welding. Oh, we added a Python, also a beam line in there. But a lot of facility upgrades and just making it a good place to work again.
Yeah.
Right.
So the value is in the customer base, the employees themselves.
Yeah.
Like what
yeah.
made it? Yeah.
Yeah, and you can, they're hardworking people. There was already a good workforce there.
Right.
From when it went bankrupt. The employees were still in the town,
Yeah.
and had the knowledge. And we actually brought in a strong leader from our Houston facility to run that facility, so he was able to bring our culture, our safety culture, the way we treat people, the way we run an organization, understand the costs. So having someone from our organization to go lead that company is a big part of the success as well. There's actually 3 of our Houston employees moved to Alabama to
Okay.
run that facility,
Yeah.
help run that facility.
What town in Alabama is this?
Fayette.
Fayette, Alabama. All right. Yeah, I lived in Birmingham for a while.
You probably
so-
know it from the Frog Level Festival.
Oh
yeah,
yes,
everyone.
yes, yes. Well,
So you
I'm
fully
sorry,
you
I
fully
should,
committed to the accent
that's
right
hor-
there.
It's horrible. I mean, Mr. Louisiana here, this horrible. It's ridiculous.
So
The-
what's
but-
the Alabama Frog Level Festival?
Well, when they built the town, it was near a swamp. So they built the town where the frogs would be along the swamp at Frog Level. So then they named the town Frog Level. So
I needed to know this.
Festival. They have a festival every October with a car show and a band and, all the different food, and it's pretty neat.
That
Frogs walking around
And
on crutches.
a frog jumping contest. So
That's awesome. That's awesome, and that's a great story to tell because I've been put a lot of miles on rural roads. Going to small towns where I know. Well, a lot of times too, it's kind of a sad story. But you go to these small towns and you had this large OEM that shuttered. From moving to Mexico or overseas, and it's just decimated. But it's so great that you guys swooped in early on and say, all right, the workforce is here. The talent is here. They're useful folks. We can make this happen. And it's also such a common story that, folks grow a business, with pure grit in this business where they have the relationships, they have the eager, eager drive and just push it and push it and push it, and yet it's all driven by that one person or a handful of people, and they don't push that responsibility down to the shop floor, which obviously is the
yeah, they
O'Neill
try
culture.
to do everything, and at some point you can't do everything, and
Right.
at some point you can't finance everything by yourself. and
Right.
Right.
It becomes a challenge.
It's between 10 and 20 million. And then which people are shocked to hear. It's like, man, you can be a $10 million company and still run it on an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. And in that town too, the largest employer had shut down across the street from this. So you come into a town like that that's seen, their largest, it was a glove manufacturer shut down, and having this company also shutting down, you can really make an impact in that town, and you can be part of that town. When you're in Houston or you're in Cincinnati or you're in Pittsburgh, you're not as vital to that town. So it is good to be, an important part, and to be, with some great hardworking people in that town.
Yeah. I imagine, you mentioned the Houston representatives coming over to help run the facility and bringing the culture. I mean, is buy-in a little bit easier in a situation like that where
It's by the individual,
Yeah.
Some people it's a struggle, some it's not. But they got it done. But it's difficult.
Yeah. What is the greatest challenge to that type of integration of another organization into the bigger fold?
Well, you're changing everything from the safety culture is always difficult. Often we find we come in and they're not wearing gloves, they're wearing shorts, they're wearing flip-flops. You never know what
Right.
culture they had before. So that's usually our initial struggle is, look, we're going to wear gloves, we're going to wear glasses, we're going to follow these 17 policies, we're going to be safe. And that'll filter out some people that don't want to be safe, and
Right.
we have to part ways with them. But that's the first struggle. Then you get into accountability, and we have certain standards we need to meet and certain numbers of parts that need to be shipped every day, or we don't satisfy the customer and we may be bankrupt again. So you set those standards and start then bringing in the ERP system and our accounting and
Right.
our scheduling and our supply chain. So it's in phases, and there are always rough patches. There are always people that will fight it and sometimes don't stick around, but in the end, we know it works, and we get there.
Yeah.
So kind of bring us through the Tennessee experience, because like you have to you have to fill a plant with talented people.
Yeah, so that's new for us. We had the people before in the other two acquisitions. We got the call. We said we need to be within an hour of this manufacturer in Tennessee. So the general manager and myself, we looked at every metal building and chicken house within an hour of that facility, and nothing was looking good. Eventually we found a good building and one that was right for us, and then the owner decided not to sell that. So then we went back a second and third time and finally found a good building to purchase. But what we've done so far, we're only going to have about 30 people in that facility. It's a smaller than, it's probably half the size of our normal facility. We've hired probably 7 of those 30 so far, and we brought them to Pittsburgh to train. So we train them with our existing
wow.
people to learn the culture and learn. And since it's the same parts and same equipment, they're training on the exact machine that they're about to be running in Tennessee. So we're able, in that case, we're getting new people, but we're incorporating them into our culture at an existing location. Then we'll move them to that location. And obviously we'll have support from Pittsburgh over the Tennessee facility, teaching them our systems and our the way that we run our company.
That's interesting. In Pittsburgh, do you have like a value stream dedicated to this customer, or is it mixed in with everything else in Pittsburgh?
Mixed in with everything else, but the largest customer.
Yeah, and then but then you move to Tennessee. Now you've got a factory devoted to this customer. So how's that playing into to the plant design?
Well, that's kind of makes it easier. It's riskier. You've got one customer, but we've got an over 20-year partnership. I mean, there's a lot of trust here. Neither one of us can be successful without the other, especially when you have to be in that proximity to be just in time with those parts. But having already made the parts in Pittsburgh, it was very easy to lay out the building. We knew how many square foot we were going to need for these parts. We knew what equipment we were going to be buying, so that helped us determine the footprint and how we set it up.
Where Kingsport? Where's that located in Tennessee? I
It's
apologize to all our
north,
Tennessee
yeah,
listeners.
you just offended the Tri-Cities. It's the northeast portion. We're in Kingsport. We're calling it Bristol because that's the closest town that you've heard of.
Oh yeah, Bristol.
So we're calling
Yeah.
even though we're in
Yeah.
Kingsport, we're calling it OMS. We didn't know if we were going to call it Kingsport or Bristol, and marketing said we were going to call it Bristol, so it's OMS Bristol.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, my daughter's looking into App State, so which is not
Oh,
too
okay,
far
yeah,
away.
yeah.
And
But
how,
that's
so
a beautiful area.
it's a beautiful area. How's the infrastructure with after the hurricane?
The area we're in, we didn't get
It didn't
flooding.
get okay.
And we had purchased the building a month before the flood, and then I see on the news the whole region is flooding. I thought, uh-oh.
Oh,
Is that
wow.
our- But then luckily it wasn't, at the facility we had purchased. So
Yeah.
Okay.
How big is the facility?
40,000 square feet, but it's on 11 acres and it's graded to double the 40. It's like half the
Oh,
building
okay.
initially built. So you could double out to 80 and then go lengthwise up to 120, which would be the size of our other facilities. And that is the plan, to grow it
Right.
to be similar to our other locations, which are typically just over 100 to just over 200,000 square feet at
Right.
most of our facilities.
Yeah, a customer could have dragged you to a worse place. I mean, that's
Oh, yeah,
that's
it's a beautiful area.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's a lot of economic activity
hmm
in the side.
And so far, I mean, we've been able to, we've only hired the 7, but it wasn't hard to find the first 7 employees for that location.
Yeah, is the labor market not as tight as maybe as the closer you get to Nashville?
I don't know yet.
It's interesting though. This is kind of what proves the metal of scaling custom fab and contract fab is that I've written stories about other large fab shops that have just invested incredible amounts of money into a huge new plant dedicated to a customer. The customer pulls the plug. Oh no.
Yeah.
And
Now
then,
what do we do?
but no, they redeploy and now the plant is more successful than ever because of the common technology, because of the scalability of the whole operation. Very small chance of that happening, obviously, but obviously you plan to scale up and say, all right, we got this one large account, and now we're gonna tack on 5, 6. Is it going to be new customers? Are you going to spread the work around with others?
And there
or-
is definitely more work with that customer, I
Mhm.
think, that we could pursue eventually. But yeah, we're always quoting new customers. We're getting thousands of inquiries to our website every month, and we're filtering through those. So there are plenty of opportunities that would fit in that region over time, but it's hard to say. I like to say we're diverse in our customer base, but we're not really by location. We have one large customer usually at each location, but different customers at all of the locations. So one location might have a tough year when ag's down, but it's picking up on energy infrastructure at another location. So our diversity is in our locations, not at one location in our customer mix.
Right, that kind of makes you the assistant maker. As one, I went to Japan years ago, and they showed me some contract fab shops, and the guys say we got assistant maker. Then we call them the assistant maker, right next to the OEM that to
Yeah,
supply,
yeah.
but they have multiple plants to diversify. their
That's
revenue.
us.
And that-
We haven't used that term, but
That's right.
but we're usually, with the freight costs, you're usually in close proximity to that large OEM.
Mhm.
Right, especially the size of your parts you produce, and
Yeah.
it just makes sense.
Do you get into a situation where you're successfully leaning on sister plants to maybe help out with extra work, or maybe there's opportunity to do something a little bit more efficiently at another plant?
We do, if we have equipment downtime, we sometimes move equipment to another location so we can't shut the OEM down.
Right.
And that's a bad thing. So we will move the work around from time to time amongst locations. And some of that is long-term. We do have parts that go for more than a year at one location, shipped into another location, and then put in the right reusable racks for that OEM and shipped in every day. So we do a little of that, but with the freight costs, not so much. More often than not, you're dealing with getting parts every day to
That
a
kind of makes the
nearby.
decision for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
So bring us through your sales and bring it from the initial prospect to finally the bid and to the shop floor, kind of that cycle. I've talked to a lot of shops in recent months where, they're really, because obviously everything's changing. The market is changing. A lot of supply chains are going to be changing in the next year or two, perhaps. There may be, or maybe not. We don't know. But but just kind of bring us through, how you've perfected the sales process and that sales funnel, getting
I'd
new
rather
customers
not tell
in.
anybody. No, so what we've done, it's all in-house. We have, and it's not a big organization. We have a director of sales and we have 2 people on his marketing team, and they manage the website, and the leads come in through our website, and it's thousands a month. Some is, I want a new fence for my farm. There's someone just wanting one welded, which isn't us. So they try to filter through all of these thousands of leads, find the ones that make sense for us, and then they have a knowledge of our locations. They've been to all of our locations, and they say, well, geographically, this is a fit for Houston, or equipment-wise, this is a fit for Cedar Falls, Iowa. So they determine, okay, first of all, this is a product we want to make, and we can make this well. We have the people and the equipment to make it. Then they decide which facility or facilities would be best to quote this, and then that quoting is done locally at those facilities, because they understand the cost better. We don't want to be doing all of that in Birmingham and saying, hey, we sold $5 million, congratulations. Well, it's going to cost us $7 million to make it. You quoted it wrong. So we want to make sure they're involved in quoting their own work. We're just sending them the leads.
Right. That's
Do you share forecasts with the majority of your customers?
Most of the OEMs have a pretty good forecast, and we do a 12-month rolling S&OP plan. So we know, the first 3 months is probably 95% accurate, and then going out 6, maybe 85, and then out a year, maybe still probably 70% going out a year. So we're fortunate in that way that we know what's coming. We know what equipment and capacity we're going to need. At least 3 months out, it's solid. And a lot of people don't have that advantage, but we do.
Right. That sector you'd mentioned earlier, the data warehousing and the buildings for the generators and the servers and all that, where are we in that creation
Well,
cycle?
depending on the customer, they'll say 3 to 10 years. It's going to be going on. But we were told that with the Amazon warehouses and systems we did in there, loading systems, dock systems, and that went away in a year. So you never know. So with that kind of work where we're not certain about the forecast, we're not certain about where it's going, how long it's going to last, we try to use that as more of a temporary fill-in or transactional work until we see it's going to be real. Then we may get more into that. But at this point, I couldn't tell you. I don't know if it's 3, 5, 10 years of seeing that, but it's active now.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get involved, and we're trying to fill the holes that we have, open capacity with that work, and it's going well for us.
It's amazing the parties it's touching in the metal fabricating industry, where it's dominant. I mean, it's almost the business for some of these shops, and if not, it's become a tremendous opportunity.
It kind of reminds me of the telecoms in the 1990s. It's like, I visited some shops, when I was much younger, and they say, oh yeah, this is, telecom. We are, supplying MCI, and digging the trenches for the internet that we know today, and then that collapsed.
Yeah.
Well, and you have to be careful. You go all in with equipment, and you set up your facility for it, and then it's gone.
Right.
There's no warning, so.
Yeah.
We try to keep, the majority with a good 20-year relationship and fill in the rest with, some more speculative work or new stuff.
Do you see that type of trend affecting some of your competitors, where they might be putting a lot more in on the investment?
Yeah, I think some people are all in.
Yeah.
And whatever's hot. And again, it's risky. It can pay off, but it's a risk.
Yeah. Doing what O'Neill does in terms of fabricating on a larger scale, large footprint across the U.S. with, major customers, we've seen in recent years people trying to kind of become that, follow that type of same plan. Do you Is there enough work to go around for that type of approach?
Fortunately, none of them are as good as us. So we have no.
Oh,
Excellent answer. Appropriate answer.
Well, no, it's just, again, that's difficult too. When you look at difficult for that work to leave a facility that's had it for over 20 years, there's such a partnership. You have been spending 20 years getting the people and the equipment specifically for that customer. You have laid out your entire operation for them. It's an understanding that develops, and trying to take that away, they've got a big risk if they move it, and obviously it would destroy us if they moved it. So it doesn't happen often, as long as we can communicate and collaborate and work through the bumps in the road. But we have not seen that. We have not lost, large swaths of these OEM parts that we've had forever.
So in a way, they must be chasing business that's already out there that y'all.
I mean, there's always a portion that's parts that come and go.
Yeah.
That you have those, but for the main runners, that's what we do. That's what we've been doing, and that's what we're great at. So
it seems like it's very much a challenge to kind of replicate what O'Neill has, but they're doing it in a truncated time frame.
Yeah,
over a 3-4 year period. And
yeah, that would terrifies me to think that. we at going from 7 to 10 locations and adding one, every couple of years here. That's plenty challenging.
Yeah.
To incorporate that into your organization without disrupting what you've already got going, and we've been able to do that very well at that speed. I can't imagine throwing in 10 locations in 5 years.
Well, I can't even imagine managing one shop. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Now going back to, from 2018 up till today, you've had enormous kind of a transformation with the equipment you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of bring us through, was there a cultural transformation as well? Saying, hey, we're going to do this differently as far as, hey, especially robotic bending. That's a leap.
That actually was driven at the local level. The general managers tell me what they need. They tell me what they want. I'm not telling them you need to get into this or that. They do their own research. They know the customer better than I will ever know the customer. They're dealing with them every day. They know the parts they're quoting, and they looked and saw this is going to be a safety issue if we don't have a robotic press brake here, and we are not going to be able to keep up. So then they put in the request and say, if we want to maintain the parts we've had for 20 years, for the next 20, we need to get this robotic press brake. So the decision's made by the experts, not by me.
Okay. And I said, and they said, listen, it's stackable, or it's, this won't be, does it run unattended for hours, or is it?
It's attended, but it's a difference of 6 press brake operators versus one, and it's a difference of a whole bunch of back injuries versus none.
Obviously,
Right.
yes, yeah.
So it's just safer and
It's a
faster.
no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
yeah, cultural. Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of people from Tennessee being sent up to Pittsburgh to learn how to work equipment. That is there, does that, how are people within the O'Neill Manufacturing Services family, how do they run into their sister company employees? Does it happen on a regular basis?
Well, we just completed an 18-month program called EPIC. It's sort of our management training program, where we had 1 or 2 high potential upper level leaders from all of our locations come together about every 4 months for that year and a half to complete this program, to get them ready for that next acquisition to run it. So that really bonded all of those production sales leaders from all of our individual locations. We do other, for example, in the Midwest now, we call it the Midwest Triangle, where we have Cincinnati, Louisville, and Indianapolis, all under one regional general manager. We're sharing engineering, we're sharing quality, we're sharing maintenance. Whoever needs help, they're all 2 hours away. So those experts are moving around all the time. So that has increased quite a bit in the last 2 or 3 years. We didn't have as much of that before, but now there's a lot more people talking to other locations. So it's really helped.
People, you talk about buying in a local area. I imagine buying into a corporate entity, this might be a little bit hard sometimes, but having that type of cross connection, I think, would help.
And that helped too with we didn't have regional general managers initially, and now we have 3 of them that run 2 or 3 locations that are usually, in close proximity, not always. But, I couldn't get them, when I started, I couldn't get them to collaborate. Everybody was worried about their location, which as a human being, you're worrying about yourself and your people at your location. I found out the way to get them to collaborate is that they would collaborate with themselves. So if you give them 2 locations, they're willing to balance the proper workload and put the parts where they go better. And now all of a sudden it made sense to share customers and balance because
wow.
I'm now over both, not just one. When I was over one, I need to worry about this. This
Oh,
is
wow.
my world. Now my
Yeah.
world is 2 or 3 locations. And we've really seen a lot of collaboration, not just them being involved in both, but the people
Right.
under them are now being
Kind of being
encouraged
asked
to
to do
collaborate.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
The reason I brought that up is just anytime I hear Tennessee, there was a story that broke, I think, like 2 years ago where they were doing an addition at Tiger Stadium at LSU in Baton Rouge, and they had a welder from Tennessee, and he left like a signature that said "Go Vols" inside the,
Yeah,
the
welded it
scoreboard.
into-
Yeah, and that just has never sat right with me. So
Yeah.
Josh Welton wrote a blog about that.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and it's so the dynamic of I would just say to your Pittsburgh coworkers, make sure there's no like Vol stickers around or anything like that.
I know.
Yeah.
That's a great insight, though, with collaboration. Just like collaborate with yourself. That's
Yeah, yeah.
hilarious. It's like, but it makes sense now. Now that they see the value of, hey, 2 plants collaborating,
Yeah.
can you bring that up a level and say, hey, let's spread this out?
Yeah, because what we found, there are parts that don't belong in that facility, and they're perfect over here, and all of a sudden we move them. Before, we didn't even talk about moving them, but when the general manager is over both and can see the bigger picture, they get the right parts to the right location pretty quickly.
So you'd mentioned allowing these kind of locations to do their own thing, but now we're talking about a regional manager. Are there communications that occur with those regional managers at a corporate level just to kind of get a feel for what's happening? Or is that kind of decentralized?
Well, no, I'm talking to them daily, if
Yeah.
not weekly, and they're talking to each other, more than ever.
Hmm.
And then we have scheduled meetings on the forecasts and the KPI call weekly. So they're talking at least once a week all together.
Mhm.
And then, I'm talking with them obviously whenever something happens
Right,
that they
right.
need to call me about or I need to call them about. So
Yeah. So your company does some neat things in terms of awards recognition. I was on the website before we started recording, the Golden Broom Award,
yeah, yeah. Well, it's
which is literally the Golden
it
Broom.
is it with lights, with Christmas lights around it. So what that is, an important part of safety is housekeeping. If you have a clean facility, you see what's out of place. If you have a clean facility, you see the wires that you're going to trip over when you're walking through. So we encourage them to compete. And there's different awards. They're called different things at
Okay.
different locations. That's just the coolest name that
I got
they've
you.
come
Yeah,
up
yeah,
with.
yeah.
And, whoever keeps their area the cleanest will win that award and get a lunch
Yeah.
for that month, and the pride of having the golden broom near their workstation. So just a way to get some competition going. So
Is that a rotating award?
So it seems like local to
that's
facility,
a local,
right?
That's
Yeah.
a local facility award. But yeah, whoever wins it, it can move. It could stay there if they keep winning, or it could
Right.
move to from welding to forming, or from laser to
Yeah.
shipping, whatever.
That's incredibly true, though, because I've been made fun of more than once, and I'll probably relay this at a talk later today, but at the conference. But when I visit a factory, I often if I see a Kanban square, let's say, right, where they got tape down on the floor and it has color coded about, oh, this is whip, this is incoming and outgoing. And we've in fact had that at the Glendale manufacturing yesterday. I kneeled down on the floor and took a bunch of pictures. Like, wow, that's cool. And the floor was clean.
Yeah.
The plant was clean. You could tell where work was coming from, where work was going. The visual work instructions were there. Safety instructions were there. And it just, it really exudes that environment of just everybody's on the same page and there's no hidden, well, why have we been doing this all this time? Because you see exactly how it's being done. And so then if you've got collaborators come into that shop and go, wait a minute, why is he why is he walking 15 feet to go to the tool crib? It doesn't make any sense. I don't know if you had any of that kind of revelation when you had that management restructuring.
I mean, everyone does what they're comfortable doing. Some are more into lean manufacturing, some not. Some have different ways of organizing their facility, but we did see it began to look more like their initial facility. You do the things that worked for you.
Right.
You do what made you successful. Another part of the housekeeping in general is I think it helps for retention. You don't want to come in and work at a place that is a mess and trash all over the place. And as we've cleaned up these facilities, especially the ones we acquire, and we clean them up and make them look more like our existing facilities, I think it does help with the employee pride and the retention.
Right.
Yeah. Is your home organized like that?
No, dear God.
You're not taking those lessons to heart.
It's hilarious. I go and I write about lean manufacturing in the magazine. I go downstairs. I got to freaking fix some vinyl siding in our house, and I go down. It's like, oh man, I need to get a freaking right angle grinder. So I go downstairs, try to get the grind, and it's I can never find it. It's horrible. It's everything's a mess.
We've been in our house 10 years, and I still haven't unpacked certain rooms.
I did that. I moved my dad to where he is today, and it's like I unpacked. It's like, where is this from? This is like Time magazine from 1964.
It's gonna be worse. So hold on to it.
So, oh man.
Do you what do you see in terms of goals for O'Neill Manufacturing Services? Is it more growth? Is it just serving customers?
It's getting back to fuller capacity. We're coming back up now, but we're not to where we were, certainly not to where we were in 2023 as far as filling up all of our facilities. We have one or two that are still struggling at this point to be completely filled up with work. Obviously, a big focus of the next year is getting that Tennessee location up and running and profitable and safe and all those other good things. So that's going to be taking a lot of energy. We're kicking off our next EPIC class for training our future leaders. And we've actually combined this second class with our sister companies, O'Neill Steel and LECO. So it's sort of all the industrial metal divisions training leaders together. And the hope there is maybe then we start sharing more across divisions within O'Neill, because that's a barrier that hasn't been broken as much as our internal sharing.
Right.
So hoping to get all those future leaders together, there'll be a better chance for that to happen in the future.
So how do you define leadership? In other words, all right, we've got informal leaders, formal leaders, and so kind of bring me through that as far as how O'Neill defines leadership.
Well, I mean, it depends on the position, depends on the job, but the leaders in this group, we have the three pillars in this EPIC training. It's the people, the process, and the product. So, they're spending 6 months learning about those specific pillars of what we do. These people are chosen by the general managers because they see the potential to be a leader in them. They see them taking charge. They see them, being successful as leaders, maybe of small parts of the organization, and they think they have what it takes. So, I'm again putting all the work on my general manager, so I don't have to do anything. They are choosing, who those future leaders are and nominating them to go into this future training for future leaders that we have.
Right. That's you reminded me of another shop owner. It's like, I don't make any. I just push it on down. That's what I do. No, but that is so true though, because I've been in some shops where usually it's after the fact because they have an interesting story to tell and there's some reader takeaway. But shop owners tell me they used to just walk through and see rework. Red. They had one shop said we had a red tag system for rework. Like red tag, they put a red tag on it so we know where it is. And so then thereby the managers can walk through and go, why the hell is the red tag there? What's going on? What happened here? And I literally saw this at one shop. It wasn't red tag, it was different, but it was like, all right, you already, it's okay, no, first of all, it shouldn't be there in the first place.
We want the leaders that avoid the problem in the first place. So get rid of the red tags.
On the other side of that coin, like years ago, this was actually during an FMA annual meeting years ago in St. Louis. We all went to Cambridge Engineering, which is an HVAC company. But it's fabulous sheet metal shop. And they put the rework on display and said, all right, here's what's happened. Here's the root cause. And kind of everybody, it was just kind of, let go of your egos. This is what happened. And that's kind of the culture that we like to write about in the magazine, at least. So, and I assume that's kind of, where what we've seen with you guys too.
Yeah, we want those creative people that appreciate their employees, that are hardworking, that are there every day, which becomes a harder attribute to find in the world. People that show up every day, that's the biggest challenge. Creative, forward-thinking people that aren't afraid to take charge and don't have the ego problem. They're willing to admit when they're wrong.
Right.
No, do it enough, it becomes second nature.
Well, define creativity though in manufacturing. Like, how do you?
Well, I mean the idea of or take that robotic press brake. They could have just quoted it the old way. They could have just said it's going to take 6 people and it's going to be real hard, but we're going to power through it. But they had the creativity to find a different way to get it done. They went out and did the research and found the right equipment. It's also with a lot of the new customers we brought in different markets, being creative enough to make that fit in a facility that never did that kind of work before, work that you don't have a lot of expertise in. For example, with these data center buildings that we're providing parts for, we put them in a facility that had always done small form sheet metal, very thin gauge parts. And now they've taken up a third of their building welding heavy gauge galvanneal, something they've never done. And within 4 months, these creative people were able to change their business, inside those 4 walls to get that done. And that's the creativity that we need.
Yeah. Is that facility, you bought a higher power laser for that facility or no? No. Okay.
No, just moving stuff around, clearing out the space and saying, well, we don't have the ag sales right now. We're going to do something else, and we're going to find a way to do it safely and quickly. And they got it done. So
Right. It's about repurposing.
Yeah.
Going, okay, it's kind of rearranging the chessboard. Say, all right,
Yeah.
here's how we're going to do it. So.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for your time, Gareth. You got anything to add?
Yeah, I was going to say this episode's coming out right before we release the 2025 Fab 40 list, and O'Neill is a mainstay on that list. Is that a sense of pride for everyone in the company?
Oh, yeah. And, let me say this, when we get extremely large leads, oftentimes they say to we say, well, how'd you find us? Oh, well, we looked at the Fab 40. So, being in that top 5, definitely the top 10, but being in that top 5, it brings you work. People see that and they say they can handle large projects. They can handle, they can get this done quickly for us. It brings attention to us. It's another good marketing tool for us.
Yeah. The list has grown quite a bit over the years, and and the upper reaches of it have especially grown. The revenue numbers show that, and it's interesting though because just to put the Fab 40 in perspective, when I go to say a software conference, they say. And I say, 500 million. Oh, that's a medium-sized company.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Well,
And it's like,
we even thought about, not that we're competitive and we wanted to be higher on the list, that we do, obviously O'Neill Steel and LECO do a lot of processing as well. So we had this discussion, are we going to include the hundreds of millions of dollars of processing from O'Neill Steel? And we didn't.
Yeah.
Just putting it out there. We could be 2 if we wanted to. or 1.
But I think it's just it's the how manufacturing is overlooked in the sense that if you go to O'Neill facility, you're going to see assets. You're going to see raw materials, expensive machinery, products going out the door. And these companies you're talking about, software companies, you see a building. You walk in and there's people, there's Fruit Loop bar, and
There's a golden broom.
Yeah, there's like foosball. This company's valued at, whatever, hundreds of millions. And it's like not a disconnect, but it's a something that, if you're not in that world of
not
software,
tangible.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It's it's kind of interesting in the sense that, and you understand why people don't have a good idea of how things are made. It's and people wax poetic about and I'm not sure people even realize how it was made back in the day. There just happened to be more people doing the work,
Yes.
and maybe that's how word got around.
Well, another thing about the Fab 40 is it also paints a picture of how diverse it's a collection of manufacturing processes that puts together value for customers.
Yeah.
But and even at we're at the annual meeting this week, and people, I was talking to folks yesterday. They say, that's why we get along so well, is that our Venn diagrams don't scrape very much. It's not, we are not head-on competitors, and even if we were,
Yeah, we don't see much of that head-on competition that you would expect, but we don't see
because
it.
there are always different niches, there are always different
Yeah.
different ways to serve the customer, and there's like different ways to shape the sandbox of metal manufacturing, which is kind of how the Fab 40 came to be. We want to kind of define all right,
Something.
we
no, it really-
define something.
And it makes this conference much friendlier.
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
competing with each other.
But I mean,
Yeah.
when it comes down to it, you kind of described the facility making the shift of kind of the ags a little bit slower, but doing something they weren't used to doing. There's not a lot of companies that can do that successfully or actually interested in doing it.
And that's another one where you need the capital, you need the people
Right.
resources, the help from corporate to make all those things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I do talk to shops on the Fab 40 every year, I kind of am reminded, like, and here we have, a military veteran here at the conference who gave the keynote, and it was a great keynote. But it's that kind of everybody's working on tangible products. They can see the goal, they can see the purpose, versus other areas of the economy I visited in conferences where you have acronyms where I'm not sure what the heck your
I'm
purpose
working on
is.
an idea.
Working on an idea, or it's
Ideation.
Yeah.
The act of working on your
ideation.
idea.
No ideation here. It's how to get stuff out the door, and they usually use more colorful language than
Yes, we learned that the other day.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today,
Thanks
Ken.
for having me.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable to learn about O'Neill, and it's a large company, but there's definitely elements of this conversation kind of reminds me of just talking with like a single shop owner, even though that may not be the case, obviously.
Well, and that comes from, our CEO, Kraft O'Neill, being, third generation himself. I mean, he truly cares about the people and the communities we're in. I remember when I started going into the first quarterly meeting, and I'm all ready to present numbers, and he's asking, how did the people feel about that change?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with the people, with changing the way you're doing
I
it?
heard from
And I'm
Tom in
thinking,
press breaks.
Why are you asking about people? Don't you want to hear about numbers? But I mean, it's a great company to work for, and they do value the people more than anything.
That's awesome. Well, thanks a lot for tuning in to this episode of the Fabricator Podcast. I always end this. Where do we find out more information about O'Neill Manufacturing Services?
O'NeillManufacturingServices.com.
There you go.
Or on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram.
Awesome. And if you have any complaints, criticism, comments, send them to podcast@fmamfg.org.
I always like
think
when we
that's-
get a laugh out of the complaints and criticisms.
I thought he was saying he was going to take our complaints.
Complaints, criticisms.
If we have people who've gotten to this point in the podcast and you actually send us a note, we will send something back to you. Some like a valuable, like a sticker.
Or a golden broom.
A golden broom. We can spray
Golden
paint.
broom. There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Or jumping frog.
There you go. Frog leveling?
Oh, frog leveling.
There
Sorry,
you go.
frog.
Frog leveling
level.
tools.
Frog level.
Oh, frog levels.
The level at which the frogs sit.
Yeah.
We can't really
on
send
which
them
the
that.
frogs there you go.
Yeah.
All right.
This will require a follow-up episode.
That's where the O'Neill meeting will happen next, right?
Yeah,
All of you will descend upon the frog leveling festival.
We
That'd
actually
be
just
awesome.
did that in Tuscaloosa. We had our GM meeting. That's the closest city to Fayette that could house
Right.
the meeting. Yeah.
That's funny.
Fabulous.
There you go.
That's awesome. Ribbit.
On that note, we're out of here.
All
Thank
right.
you.
The Fabricator Podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association, located in Elgin, Illinois. The show is hosted by Dan Davis and the staff of FMA Communications. The podcast is produced by Gareth Slager and recorded and edited by Griffin Hammond and Dana Weicker. Sales support provided by Andy Flando. Additional production support by Elizabeth Gavin, Mike Owens, Billy Kolpa, Pat Simon, Brandon Geyer, and me, Sarah Spring. Email us at podcast@fmamfg.org. Thank you for listening.
Vanilla Ice is the best rapper of all time.